Today's episode of the Fresh Fiction Podcast is brought to you by REVELL Books and Bethany House, publishers of Christmas by the Sea by Melody Carlson. When Wendy Harper inherits her family's beach house cottage in Seaside, Maine, she sees it as a way to finally pay off the debts that have mounted since her husband died. But before it can be sold, the neglected property must be renovated. She and her 12-year-old son, Jackson, move in temporarily, she reminds him, in order to do the work themselves, even though Christmas is coming. The charming town, along with local craftsman Caleb Colton, pulls on both Wendy and Jackson. Wendy knows that the most responsible thing to do is to sell the cottage and return to Ohio, but the lure of the sea is much harder to resist. It's my pleasure to welcome Melody Carlson to the podcast. Welcome, Melody.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me today. Is it weird for you to have a Christmas book out in September? I know it's very traditional, but it must be always kind of weird to put your mind in that spot.
It is weird, and actually it didn't used to be. It used to be it would come out, in November, and then it started coming out in October,
Yeah.
and then September is like, it feels like it's still summertime.
I know.
Yes.
It's very similar to the pumpkin spice latte release schedule. Used to be right after Thanksgiving, and now it's August. So
Yes, yes. But the funny thing is, I write these Christmas books usually in July, which, I'll be in my office with the air conditioning on, and then I'll step outside expecting to see snowflakes.
Yeah.
And it's like 100 degrees out there.
What do you do to get yourself in the mood to write a Christmas book in the middle of July?
Oh, that's a good question. Fortunately, imagination is, wonderful. You can, like I said, I'll step in there and I'll get into that world, and it's like I start feeling like the snow is flying, and I do smell hot chocolate, although I'm not drinking hot chocolate. But yeah, it just kind of through my imagination, it comes to life.
Oh, that's amazing. And do you live in a place where you normally see snow when it is winter, or are you in a warmer climate area?
No, we're actually in the mountains in Oregon, so we generally have snow and often have snow at Christmas time.
Oh, that's nice. So that definitely helps you kind of tap into your own memories of the snow then.
Yes, and there's pine trees all around, and, it has that sort of feel, so it does lend itself to Christmas.
Oh, that's perfect. I live in Texas, so it's very hard for me to imagine cold anytime when it's 1,000,000 degrees outside.
Yeah.
For our listeners, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes. Well, I've been writing publishing, I should say. I feel like I've been writing my whole life, but publishing for the last 25 years or so. And it's writing and storytelling is just, my love. But, I have a life outside of that too. And where we live here in Oregon, my husband and I really enjoy the outdoors, and we have a motorhome that we like to take camping. It's kind of luxury camping. It's not one of those enormous ones, but it's kind of a mid-size. Mm-hmm. And, and I like to garden, and we recently downsized from, we lived out of town, and we moved into town because writing is such an isolated life that I just felt like I needed to be closer to people, and so we've been redoing this whole property here in town, and we had to do all the landscaping and ended up building a studio because we downsized too small. Our house was too small. So my husband built a studio for me. That's where I am right now.
Oh, that's so nice.
Yeah,
that's great. And so you get to be a full-time writer.
Pretty much so. The lovely thing about writing is you do get to call your own hours. So, sometimes if I want to do something during the middle of the week instead of on the weekend because things aren't so busy, I can just take off, and then I'll end up, writing during the weekend because we live in a tourist town, and so it gets crazy here, especially in the summertime. So I sort of just adjust my schedule to accommodate it.
Mm-hmm, for sure. And then that way you can avoid people when you don't need to see them, and then go out and enjoy it when you want to.
Absolutely. Like right now, we're just about to have one of our great events. It's the Folk Festival, and it'll go from Friday through the weekend. And town will be packed, but it'll be fun, and I'll be there with my lawn chair.
That's so cool. So when you moved to this town, since you lived outside of it, had this been a place that you and your husband had experienced for many years, or is it you just kind of found this place and fell in love and wanted to move there?
It's both. Actually, ironically, we honeymooned nearby where we live now, but we actually moved here about 25 years ago, but we lived outside of the town, and then we decided to move into the town. So it's been our town for the last 25 years, but it's a delightful little place.
You write these really lovely, charming small town stories, and I bet you pull a lot of inspiration from your own hometown.
I do, and people hardly believe it when I say our town does not have a stoplight, and we don't, and we get plenty of traffic, and there's, I've been in towns that are smaller than ours that have a stoplight, but for some reason we just don't.
That is so funny. Yeah. Well, it might disturb everybody. They might get thrown a little bit.
Yes, they put in a roundabout, which did disturb people at first, but now everybody kind of likes it.
So you say that you have been writing your whole life. Do you remember the first book you wrote?
The first actual book, besides being a child and typing on my little old-fashioned typewriter and stapling it together. But the first actual book, when I got kind of serious about writing, I was running a group home daycare center and preschool. We had an addition in our home, and my background had been in early childhood education, as well as a lot of other things. But I just got bit by the writing bug, and so I started writing on a yellow legal pad, and I wrote a whole book during the kids' nap times, over the course of a month, and it was actually a juvenile book, and it's the only book I haven't published.
Oh wow!
And it's probably because I wrote it in longhand, and then I typed it into one of those old electronic typewriters, and then finally I got my first computer and I put it on there, but I don't know where it is now.
Yeah,
yeah, it was called Sadie Mulcahy, New Girl in Town.
That is so cute. I'm always so curious when I ask that question, because some people will tell me about the book they wrote at age 4 that they stapled together and gave to their mom as a Mother's Day gift.
Yes, and my mom still has those.
Yeah, that's great. So what is it about small towns that you find so intriguing that you kind of want to revisit them?
Oh, I just love small towns, and actually the Christmas by the Sea, the book that we're kind of talking about, I set it in a small town in Maine because I live in Oregon, and I write so many books in Oregon that I kind of start feeling like Oregon is this little, kind of backwoodsy place that not everybody maybe wants to read about. But the town was really inspired by our beach town where we had a beach cabin, but I just kind of transferred it over to Maine because I have written about Maine before along the sea. So I've done a lot of research on the Maine seashore, which is kind of similar to ours in a lot of ways.
Oh, interesting. So, I was wondering if Maine and, I know, different coasts, but I wondered if their topography might be similar between Maine and Oregon.
It is, because we're about the same parallel line and kind of the same climate, and I was really surprised. I've been on the East Coast, but I've only been around Martha's Vineyard and that area, which is not that different than Maine, but I was surprised at how that felt familiar too. So that when you're in those northern regions, you can imagine that it's similar. Absolutely.
Well, and that's interesting too that you write about Maine, but have you never been?
No.
Wow.
I feel like I've been there because I did a series for Guideposts that was all set on the Maine coast. So I spent a lot of time reading and studying and kept thinking I was going to go over there, but I never actually got up there. It's on my bucket list.
I was like, one day you have to do a book signing out there.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
You've had so many different genres that you kind of have been able to put your name onto, everything from contemporary to small town to cozy. And I am curious, with those genres and the ones that you've written, why do you feel your voice works so well with them? And why do you keep coming back to them?
Oh, that is a good question. When I very first started writing, I really wanted to do character-driven books. And it was funny because I remember saying that to people in the publishing industry, and they're kind of like, well, what is that? What does that mean, Because that was a long time ago. But I love stories where it's kind of a small story in a way, but you really delve deeply into the characters' lives, and you peel away layers upon layers of various characters, and that was always what I wanted to do most of all. But what I discovered over time, and especially looking back, is in my opinion, every good story is character driven. It's like you just need that person that pulls you in and tugs you through and makes you laugh and cry. And so, and it works whether you're writing, I've done a lot of children's books and teen books and suspense and history, and it doesn't matter to me whatever it is. It's like the first thing I need is that character. And then of course, then I am really a lot of times into settings too, but character. And, I've heard people, they talk about plot driven stories, but I'm thinking, well, I don't see how you can really have a plot without a character.
Yeah, without intriguing characters, for sure.
Yes, and so that's kind of my general philosophy in a nutshell.
Well, and that allows you to really explore different reactions of your characters, and I think that makes it so relatable for readers, for sure.
Yeah, and I try to keep it real. I mean, it's fiction, but I want it to live, breathe real, and I pull things out of real life, and a lot of times a character is inspired by somebody I know, and there's pieces of myself here and there.
Yeah. Do you find it fun to put yourself and to put other people in maybe not a whole constructed character based off of another person, but obviously taking composites? Do you find that as a fun thing to do, or do you ever worry that maybe you're putting too much of yourself out there, or if your friend's going to read it and maybe not have the reaction to it that you anticipated?
Yeah, I think a lot of it I do subconsciously when it's myself, and I don't even recognize it as I'm doing it. When I'm inspired by somebody else, so I've had that concern, but early on in my career, one of the books that I wrote, which actually won a national award real early on, which was very encouraging. My mother had inspired one of the characters in there, and she read the book. She loved the book, and she goes, but that character, and she said the name, she goes, she's nothing like me. And I just, oh, yeah.
You're like, okay, Mom. I feel like if I wrote my mom into a book, she would instantly notice it, and she'd have a lot of questions for me.
I was worried about that with this one, because actually it was a mother that had two daughters, and my mom had two daughters, and there were similarities in the daughters, but it was all mixed up. You couldn't, I could see pieces of my sister, I could see pieces of me, but the mom character, I could see the most pieces. But that was so funny, because she was like, I can see you and your sister, but that's not me.
That is
perspective.
Too funny. Always perspective, yes. Yeah. You're just holding up a mirror to life. That's what you do.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Christmas by the Sea. Tell us a little bit about Wendy's story.
This story was actually, even though I say character-driven stories, and it is, but the setting was really a huge part of the inspiration behind this book. And I mentioned that we'd had a cabin at the coast for quite a few years, and we had completely restored it, and it was just kind of one of our little sweet spots. And one Christmas, we just felt like we needed to get away. And Christmas is also my husband's birthday, so it makes it kind of more interesting. So we decided, let's spend Christmas at our beach cabin, because various families were doing other things. And so we were there, and then I really do like to decorate, and I like to do the whole Christmassy thing, and didn't really have it there. So my husband went out and got me a tree, and we had a little sunroom, and we put it in the sunroom, but I really didn't have much to put on it. And we went down, like we often would do, just beach combing. And I was always looking for sand dollars, but the whole time we'd been there, I think I'd found like 6. And for some reason, there'd been a storm, and we were there at an early tide, low tide, and we found literally hundreds of sand dollars. And we were just like kids. We were just over the moon about it. We just stuffed our pockets, and then we ran home, and we got, bread bags, and we filled them. And then the next day we went back and got almost as many. And we had almost 1,000 sand dollars, which, it was hilarious.
That's
and we
so
still
funny.
have. So then I thought, well, I had cleaned them all. And the funny thing was, it's very laborious, but it was so fun. And then I thought, I'm going to turn these into Christmas decorations. So I designed out of my head these angels made out of sand dollars.
Ooh. And
hung them all over the tree. And it was the most beautiful tree we'd ever had. I put other things on there too, kind of from the sea. And we just sat there, and just in awe of this, lovely creation that we'd made. So that was a part that I thought, someday I'm going to put that in a book. And this was the book I put it in.
I love that. Is that typical for you, for the idea, like this one scene or this one moment that you want to portray or convey, does that often happen to you, then inspires an entire novel from that point?
I wouldn't say often, but sometimes. And to me, when that happens, it feels sort of magical, and it does just pull me in. Sometimes I'll wake up and there'll be like a fragment of a dream, and it's just this little teeny tiny scene, but it begs to be a whole book. And then I'm not an outliner, so to me, it's an exploration process. And so it's like I got to find out, well, what's the rest of that story? And so even with this one, even though I knew there was going to be the scene where they found the sand dollars and did the tree, but how does that fit into a story? And so that's the fun part.
And with what I love about Wendy's story is that she's got her son Jackson in this, and it's the two of them against the world, and he is trying so hard to kind of force his mom to make roots somewhere different than where they've been before. And I just thought it was such a charming, sweet story.
Well, it's like, where do these things come from, too, is one thing that, people do ask me. And I was raised by a single mom and really hardworking. And we had two daughters, and we'd kind of band together and, do things that seemed kind of impossible, but we take them on. And I think some of that probably sneaks into my books, including this one, where, it's this single mom trying to, make the most of it, but wanting to be responsible, but, wanting a life too,
Absolutely. And it's hard when you're faced with this new place that seems to feel so right for you. And then you also know that you have to make different choices that are going to hurt in some way.
Yeah. And she's trying to be the grown up, but the interesting thing too was, she spent so much of her childhood there that it's got some, pretty strong pulls on her, but she's just really trying to, she's widowed and just wants to, make the right choices, and she's pulled.
With you having written so many Christmas stories, and I know this is probably a question you get all the time, but what is it about the Christmas tradition that you love to convey in your books?
Well, there's several things, and the way that I grew up, with the single mom, in our home, Christmas was never seemed like it was that classic Christmas that you imagined as a child that everyone else was having. But fortunately, we had these grandparents who lived on the coast, and we would make the 3-hour trip to their house a lot because my mom really relied on them. It would have been nice if we'd been closer, but we'd make this drive. And they had this Victorian house, and they did Christmas just beautifully, and all of our extended family would be there, and it was just this magical time of my childhood that I always go back to, and just like, oh, I'm so grateful that they did that, because we really needed that warmth and that coziness that was missing in our daily lives. But also, that it's my husband's birthday, and there's just something about, celebrating Christmas that to me is wonderful. But then here's the caveat. I know it's a really hard time for a lot of people, and sometimes it's been a really hard time for us because you have family and relatives and things that aren't always going smoothly, and it seems like often at Christmas time things kind of go sideways. So early on when I first started writing, I thought I want to write books, that offer hope and encouragement and warmth and all of that at Christmas, but I also want to pull in some hard problems and some challenges. So all my Christmas books have a little bit of a and then where, the reader gets tugged along, but it's just because I think, that's life.
Yeah, it definitely is life. And I think that the stress of I don't mean stress in like a bad way, but just the high pressure of the holiday season always tends to kind of pull people in all these different ways. But then we also have such a romantic view of Christmas that there's nothing better than kind of settling during the Christmas season and enjoying the Christmas experiences as well.
And, as I've gotten older, I have just simplified everything around the holidays. And I love that I've done that because it just makes it easier to enjoy the holidays instead of trying to do everything perfectly and wonderfully. And I often get asked, well, what traditions, and I'm like, my tradition is that I'm getting simpler and simpler.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, Melody, before I let you go, it's getting to the time of year that tons and tons of books are coming out, and maybe different movies or TV shows that you're interested in. But I'm curious to know what you are currently watching, reading, and listening to right now.
Okay. Well, as far as watching, I watch Turner Classic Movies. I mean, I love old movies, and I don't hardly watch anything on the networks at all. I'm embarrassed to say. I used to pay more attention, but I've been disappointed so many times on things. I mean, I did enjoy This Is Us, but a lot of the new stuff that comes out, it just feels sort of wimpy.
Yeah.
You know?
I completely understand that.
So I tend to gravitate when I want to watch something. I'll either pull out something out of our own collection, or I'll watch something on Turner Classics. As far as what I'm reading, fiction-wise, I just got I don't know if you've ever seen the movie The Long, Long Trailer with Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz.
Yes, I have. Mm-hmm.
But I watched it, probably 6 months or so ago, and I thought this had to come from a book, because I've seen it, several times. And I thought there's just too much to this story that this was written as a screenplay. So then I did my research and found out, it is a book. So I got the book, The Long, Long Trailer, which is really fun, and I just started it. But what I'm really into right now is actually nonfiction that's called Beauty Will Save the World by Brian Zand, and I'm just finishing that up right now, and because it has a lot to do with art and beauty, and it's very interesting. And then I'm also reading, which is kind of funny, The Idiot by Dostoevsky, which is like very different for me. But so I'm that's 3 completely different books.
I love that. It's so interesting. It's like you've got your nice art history, you have some classic Russian literature, and some fluff. So that's great.
Yes.
Or I guess that would probably be early 20th century fiction.
Well, actually, it's written as a memoir.
Really?
Yes.
Early 20th century memoir, even better.
Yeah, good. You're good at this.
Well, Melody, before I let you go, I'm curious to know how readers can learn more about you and stay in touch with you.
My website, which I'm sorry to say is often not quite up to date because that's not our highest priority, but it's just melodycarlson.com, and I am on Facebook and trying to improve my social network, but I spend so much time writing that it's hard to do those other things.
Yeah, because you have multiple books coming out every year, so that makes kind of being very social challenging.
Yes, I do, but I do try to keep up with email, and if people want to get my newsletter, which is the one thing I do most regularly, they can go through my website and sign up for it, and then there's a way to contact me through email on my website too, and I do try to answer those. So
that's great. Well, Melody, thank you so much. Christmas by the Sea is out now, and I hope you have a great rest of your afternoon.
Thank you. You too.
Hey guys, it's Gwen. If you love what you hear, there are a few ways you can help us during season 2. First, don't forget to subscribe to the Fresh Fiction Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Podcasts, or any of your other favorite podcast apps. Rating, reviewing, and sharing the podcast with your friends helps us out more than you'll ever know. Sharing is caring, as they say. You can also find me on Twitter and Instagram as Real Vixen. I'd like to extend my thanks again to Melody Carlson for joining me today. You can find her Christmas by the Sea anywhere books are sold. Thank you to REVELL Books and Bethany House for their continued support of the podcast. Make sure you stop by freshfiction.com to find out more about Melody and other REVELL Books and Bethany authors. Until next time, happy reading.